real quickly, I just want to ask you about the McCarrick report vis-a-vis Archbishop Viganò. I know you wrote a brief analysis of the report issued by the Vatican right after it came out, and you characterized it as featuring four scapegoats, and one of them was Archbishop Viganò himself. And I wonder if you could explain just briefly what that means and how Viganò was presented in the report and how it squares with Viganò's own words and what you think.
Okay, thanks for another softball question. I could talk about this for a couple of hours, and I've only got 4 or 5 minutes. I did write there are four scapegoats in this report. How did McCarrick rise, and how come the rumors about him, which date back to the 1980s and even perhaps the 70s, were not considered by his other church brethren who made decisions about his career, and finally by John Paul II, and then also by Benedict, and then by Francis, the popes. Why was his career promoted and never halted? And the report was supposed to answer that question. But they answered by saying there were reports made, but John Paul didn't believe them, so he's to blame. John Paul's secretary, Stanislaw Dziwisz, now Cardinal Archbishop Stanislaw Dziwisz, received a letter from McCarrick in 2000 or late 1999, when McCarrick was being proposed to move. He had been a bishop in Metuchen, New Jersey, then he'd been moved to Newark, New Jersey. Cardinal O'Connor had sent a letter to Rome saying there's some rumors that I'm concerned about. There's no proof, but we're concerned that it might be something we shouldn't do to promote him either to Chicago or to New York. And then the third place was Washington. He said, I don't think we should do it. So he wasn't promoted to Chicago. He wasn't promoted to New York, but McCarrick wrote a letter to Don Stanislaw and said, tell the Pope that I have always kept my vows. I've never broken them. I have not broken the vow of celibacy. I've kept it. And John Paul looked at this letter, and we don't know what else came across his desk or who else spoke with him, but for whatever reason, he chose McCarrick to be the Archbishop of Washington, and McCarrick was there from 2000 to 2006. And this report said it was Dziwisz, who was some way close to McCarrick, Dziwisz, the secretary of John Paul, McCarrick, who had come to Rome, and it does acknowledge that he had handed out $1,000 here and $5,000 there and supported this, maybe this convent, or supported this project. So he became regarded as the American bishop who knows where the pockets are and can help people in Africa, in Asia. So people liked him for that reason. So they had an emotional reason or a financial reason for not wanting to believe allegations about him. And then 2006, Viganò wrote a report because Father Boniface Ramsey and others had sent letters to the nunciature saying there's too many allegations. We've met with priests who say someone has molested them, that McCarrick has molested them. And Viganò wrote a report saying we should take some type of action. You guys who are the bosses, I think on the basis of this evidence, my recommendation as a staff guy would be take some action here, because this is a smoldering case and it's too much harm is being caused. But they set that aside, and then Benedict finally said, okay, I'm not going to issue an official denunciation or condemnation. I'm going to say this, all of these allegations mean that the wisest thing for you, Cardinal McCarrick, is to go now into a quiet retirement. Do not travel, do not speak publicly, but it was not an official sanction. It was it was an order. It was a request, but McCarrick always opposed it and flouted it. And so nobody knew. And what people say is this was a problem of Benedict's government and the report itself. So Benedict, being a man of study, of theology, a professor who never wanted to be even a bishop. He wanted to stay a professor, but John Paul made him a bishop of Munich. Sorry, not John. Paul VI did in 1977. Benedict then became an ecclesial figure, worked in the Vatican for the rest of his career, and in a sense, never was in a way happy there because he really liked being a professor. And then was elected Pope, but he never wanted to be a governor. He wanted to entrust someone like Cardinal Bertone with those types of decisions. So the report says Benedict didn't act in a clear enough way. So he's the third scapegoat. And then they say the fourth scapegoat, or the fourth culpable, is Viganò himself, because after he was in late 2011 sent to America, early 2012, he's just been in America a month or two, he gets a request from Cardinal Ouellette to say, we've got one other rumor about McCarrick now, who by that point is 82 years old. And the thought, I think, was that he's pretty old, he might pass away, the case will close, he's not so active anymore. These things are related to the 70s and to the 80s, maybe the 90s, but maybe nothing today. So Viganò was asked to check on something in New Jersey, and Viganò says he did make a call and it was handled verbally. He investigated verbally, but the report says he didn't investigate. So there's a disagreement there. But Viganò is blamed as late as 2012, not investigating McCarrick sufficiently. So he's the fourth scapegoat of this report. And the report says there was no blame at all of Pope Francis, who then in 2013 starts to ask McCarrick again to go on missions for the Vatican to places like China, even as he's now in his mid-80s. So there's a lot more that could be said about this, but the report was judged by myself and by a lot of other people as not really explaining that group that somehow supported and appreciated McCarrick and kind of winked at any of his actions that weren't good. And I think that whole aspect remains unexplored, and there's more to explore on why McCarrick was so powerful that may relate to, there's reports on the internet now that he was approached both by the KGB and the FBI back in the 80s to be kind of an agent or a double agent. And all of that is very murky and unclear, but McCarrick was close to our government, was close to the Chinese government, made trips to Russia. And therefore there's something here, I think, that would warrant further investigation if we really want to understand his story.